Okay, I have people over here that are going all the time. I wonder how long it's going to take her to pick up the mic. Huh? How fast was that? I ask you. How fast was that? All right, this is me, Debbie, with you on the 15th day of September, a day I'll always remember. That was the day that my daddy died. I am here with you on Spreaker.com/Debbie Daily, Debbie somebody. And of course, the blog Stock Radio at Debbie Daily #1. I think we are going to have a stellar show tonight. At least I hope we are. At least I'm going to try and have a stellar show. I am, of course, going to be with you for the next 180 minutes. Shouts out to all the people that I talked to last night, which is Audrey Bones, the lovely Audrey, the lovely Catherine. I sent her some pictures. I sent her a baby picture of me and a picture of my father and a picture of my mother. I think I sent her a picture of my father. And I sent her a picture of my ring that I have, which is gorgeous in my very own opinion. Now, before we get this train wreck started, I will, of course, go to Skype and, as ordered by my boss, Apocalypse, put on my Skype that I am now on the air. So let's do that as we speak. Tonight we will be taking a study into the book of Genesis. Genesis is a complicated book in the Bible. It's the very first book of the Bible. A lot of people believe it is the beginning of everything. A lot of very smart people. I frankly believe, after the research I've done, that it was written by Moses. Moses was thought to have written the first 5 books of the Quran and also of the Torah, which is the Bible that is used by the Judeo religion, the Judaism, Jews, whatever you want to call it. It is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Wait a minute. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, I believe, which were ascribed by Moses. These people would sit in their houses made of bricks, and they would have a scribe with them. They wrote just like we did. They wrote, they had instruments they used for writing pens, and they sat and they wrote. They called them scribes. If you've ever seen the movie, the film, The 10 Commandments, you will remember there's many parts in there where Ramses II, which is played by none other than Yul Brynner, the very muscular Yul Brynner, he says, "So it shall be written, so it shall be done." And little things like that obviously meant that the scribes were writing things down, and as we speak, well, that's what we're reading today. We're reading what they wrote down. And the study of the book of Genesis is a very, very interesting book, and I really hope that everybody's here tonight on time so that we can get the ball rolling and get right down to business. I'm going to do 2 things before I go, as we say, go to the board, and that would be to go ahead and pull up the Bible Gateway. That's where we read from, everybody. It's BibleGateway.com. It's one word. Simply Bible Gateway, Gateway, and then .com. We read from that, from the NIV, the New International Version. It's a little bit easier to understand. If you really want to understand, go to the easy-to-read versions. There are over 100 versions on that site. The #1 source on the internet of the Bible. And there's readers. Did you know that you can start with Genesis 1 with the reader and actually have a free audiobook of the entire Bible, because it's nonstop. And if you don't want it, you have to do what I do, which is click non-continuous. So, having said that, we've got our Bible Gateway pulled up, and we are going to go over and pick them up on the board, whoever's there. All right, Spreaker's fine. Hi, Spreaker people over there. Spreaker's rolling. We're coming out over there at a 128 bit rate. Nice. We're coming out over here. Chat rooms there. Episodes. All right. Everything looks good. Let's go to the board. All right. Da-da-da. I wonder if this is my partner in crime. Is this you?
Oh, Debbie, can't you tell? How are you this grand evening?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so well, I would be triplets if it were any different. I will say, just listening to you and
What?
just before you came on, I said, Debbie, you are a queen of Blog Talk Radio, for sure. And like unto yourself, I'm a stem winder regarding whatever I choose to participate, the best of its kind. Last week, just to get a couple of things straight, if I may, I'm actually licensed to teach the scriptures. I don't often put that forward.
Stop. What did you just say? You kind of faded up. You're licensed to teach the scripture. You're licensed to teach the script. Is that what you said, sir? I am honored.
That is exactly what I said. I'm sorry.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, I am. And the thing of it is I don't publicize that or broadcast it. And the only reason I mention it now is because I'm very patient, by the way. And a couple of things that were said last week, I think if you played your tape, you kind of bent over backwards to cater to the lowest common denominator, as I like to say. And that is, you were saying things like, well, it's just his opinion. And you know what I did, just out of care and concern, I actually looked up some words that would better depict my position. And better than opinion, although opinion is a good word, because opinion refers to some court decisions that are issued. But I think reason, confidence, conviction, doctrine, tenet, principle, persuasion, truth, analyses, or even interpretation would be much better. And most of those words incorporate the notion of reasoning, and dealing with the available evidence. So an opinion, by the way, is not a bad word, but I think the way it's generally perceived, it is very lambent. It's very surface. But it says a belief or judgment that rests on grounds insufficient to produce complete certainty. And so in law, it means the formal statement by a judge or court of the reasoning and the principles of law used in reaching a decision of a case. So I would say that although opinion is good, I think I would ask you, just based upon what I've shared with you, I think it needs to be fortified a little bit more than just saying to people that this is one's opinion, because if it were just my opinion, I wouldn't be sharing it. I think this is crucial. I think it's crucial leading ultimately to the Messiah, and I think it's crucial ultimately leading to faith in the Messiah, known as the Christ, as it were, which means anointed one, Christos. And so I think, again, the words, if you were going to depict me, and like I say, I am licensed. Now, I don't have to have that. I mean, and I don't even have to tell you that. I think the presentation itself should depict it, or I should go and get relicensed. I don't know. But the point is that I think a word, it needs to be said with a little bit more involvement than it's just his opinion, as if one could say, well, since it's just his opinion, I don't have to take it seriously. And I'm not saying that's exactly what you meant, but I think with many people, that could be the takeaway. And I always put emphasis upon the takeaway. So I think the word confidence, conviction, doctrine, tenet, principle, persuasion, I think those words convey much more of an impact of what we're dealing with here than it's just something that's fly by night and a person can either accept it or reject it. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? Does that...
Well, I want to start off, yes, I want to start off by saying now it's all explained as to why you are so brilliant about this. And number two, I used to get paid $65,000 a year to sit in a very posh office reading slip opinions from the Court of Appeals in not only the state of Texas, in the 5th District, but I also had to read slip opinions from the federal government. And having read those slip opinions, I actually was responsible for finding the biggest acquittal in the history of North Texas because I found a little piece of information that said that a locked briefcase is covered under the 4th and the 14th Amendment of the United States Civil Rights of the you know how words always escape my mind, of the Constitution, okay? And so I wanted to mention that. Number two, I agree with you. Opinion has been overused by so many people because it's like, well, aren't you a little misopinionated? Or they're opinionated. Or, opinion is a very overused, misused word. So I like interpretation. When you said that, and if you'll remember, Mr. Solution, we were attacked last week in the chat room, and I believe a couple of times on the phone whenever Patrick called in and just went all over you and said, and I just said, hey, we're not stating this as fact. This is basically our, and I'll say now, interpretation of the Word of God. And so that's why I got a little bit militant last week. Was, if you remember, we were attacked. Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. And Debbie, just a couple of things. And I know you called me brilliant. I never refer to myself that way, but nevertheless, I think you're brilliant. And I like to actually draw from your brilliance. And it is simply this. I know into knowledge, there's a passage in the Scriptures that says, with all your get understanding. So some people may have knowledge, but they don't have understanding. And understanding, or wisdom, which is a synonym for understanding, is different from just having knowledge. I've actually studied certain savants, or what we call very, very bright people. Some people graduate high school at 16 or 15 and then end up graduating college.
Dalton, it's me. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, so be real quiet, okay, Pumpkin? Dalton?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Shh.
Or practical application of knowledge. And so you'll find people with knowledge bubbling over, but no wisdom. And so they will say things that are patently out of order. And I think each one of us has to judge that for himself or herself.
But don't you think
I'm a doer. That's what I ultimately am. And, there's a scripture that says wisdom is proved by its children or by its results. And so that's really what I take my cue from. But I think that if you and I, banter this, I think it's much better served. I know you're in the chat room. Some demons are in the chat room. And a demon's purpose is to distract from any truth. And so I would, just encourage you, let you and I talk about it, because I think ultimately you are the best banterer. You are the best one that we can, go back and forth with this and produce some takeaways. I think the chat room, and I'm not saying in every instant, but the chat room, especially certain people that will be left unnamed at this particular point, but they know themselves, and you know who they are, and I know who they are, they're going to provide more smoke than heat, or more smoke than fire. So I think I do enjoy your mind. I appreciate your mind, and I've told you this in the past, and I don't kid around. I think it would be best for you and I to go back and forth with the points of Scripture than to oftentimes search the desolate landscape that's presented by certain people in the chat room, if you catch my drift.
Yes, enough said. I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree. And I agree.
Let me say this. This is an exceedingly powerful book. And I prepared for the book. I didn't want to do a whole lot of, written information because some people say I'm a little bit too professorial. And I don't want to be that way. I want to be that way for me. But for the average person, I just want to present it to where they can grasp it. Now, this is a profound book, and I think it should be approached with some degree of reverence, and this is even for the non-believer, because of the place that this book holds in history alone. Just as, the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, or many other works of antiquity. So I think that, and I studied this book in college, actually, from a literary standpoint. But I think the historicity and the authenticity of this particular book is well noted. And I just think, like I say again, you and I are well able to deal with the ins and outs that Genesis presents. Now, one thing I'll say with respect to these scriptures, either there's a God or there's not a God. If there's not a God, I think a lot of people forget the implication. They think, well, if there's not a God, we can just go merrily along our way. If there's no God, all rules, all bets are off. In other words, it's totally up to man, and whatever man does is what man does. There's no right or wrong. If there's ultimately no God that says, you shall not murder, or you shall not steal, or all of the other things that are, demonstrative of the Ten Commandments and following, then, of course, if there is no God, it's just as Dr. Weinberg said, who I believe is absolutely brilliant, but I think he's definitely wrong on this particular point. He says that based on his study of the universe, that it's pointless. But see, God is outside of the universe. By definition, aseity, God is outside of time, space, matter, motion, and energy. God is the creator of that. So, I think there is ample evidence. I was listening to Dr. I'll think of his name in a minute, but he's out of Arizona State. And what he says is that ultimately the universe created him. Now, he'll say the universe created him, but he's unwilling to say who created the universe. And I was listening to Richard Dawkins, and Richard Dawkins' reason for rejecting God, and you can certainly evaluate this. Richard Dawkins' fundamental reason for rejecting God was that God is a more complicated explanation because he says the universe just existing as it is understandable. But when you go into, exclaiming that a God created the universe, he says, that becomes more difficult to explain the creator of the universe. So Richard Dawkins just excludes God, although he says even if there is a God, you can't come to the conclusion that it's a caring God. So he more or less says it's a deistic God. You know, God just kind of created the universe, wound it up, and went away. So he says you can't assume that the God, even if there is a God, not that he believes there is a God, but he says if there is a God, he doesn't believe that it's a personal God as is represented by the Scriptures. But, you know, again, I think that is an insufficient reason for discounting God, because God is a disembodied spirit or an unembodied spirit. And therefore, God is the most simple explanation for the universe, because God is simply all of everything that he is. So he's not part of this and part of that. He's all loving, all knowing, you see, everywhere at once, omniscient. And that word omniscient includes the word science, so all knowing, and omnipotent, all powerful. So God is all of what he is, not part of this and part of that. So God is, in essence, when thought of, simple, not simplistic, but simple. And so I just say, again, the point would be, if there is no God, then, of course, we eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. This is it. This is it. And I don't think a lot of people would be accepting of that if they just took a moment and reflected upon it. They think there's more to life. They feel, they believe in the depth of their soul that there's more to reality than just this we experience. And I believe that is the case. I think there's strong evidence. And let me just say this. There are different kinds of evidence. Sure, the things that we can touch, smell, taste, and see are types of evidence. But there's also evidence that we accept, logic, reason, this sort of thing, deduction, induction, you know, so there are historical evidence. So there are different kinds of evidences. And I think the reason that most people have the greatest problem with there is a God, because God demands that you be accountable. Nothing else does. And so that's where people break away from, wanting to believe in God as opposed to believing in anything else that's brought to us through the avenue of history. Those other things don't make a claim upon us. They don't demand anything of us. God does. And so I think, that's the open and honest reason that a lot of people have problems with God. But those are just a few of the things that I wanted to interject.
Excellent. Excellent. Where did we leave off last week? Do you remember? I hope everybody gets there on time, because I've had so many people saying, oh, I'm getting so much from your Bible study, and they're learning things. And somebody told me just the other day, I know more now than I did before I started listening to your weekly Bible study, Debbie. Now that is something else. And there's more than just, 10 people that have told me that. Doesn't that make you feel good?
Very well. I think that's very good. I think it's very good for them. I feel good because of the substance. And I do feel good if they have listened to something that is truly good. I mean, an opera is great. I plan to go to the opera pretty soon. I like theater, opera, this sort of thing. And it's okay to feel good. I think I was asking a pastor, I deal with pastors quite often. I said to the pastor, I said, the pastor said, I believe the word is doulos in Greek, and that means a slave for Jesus Christ. And I said, please contrast where Christ said, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I said, how do you reconcile those two? And, of course, he reflected for a moment, and he ended up saying, well, as a servant of Christ, I'm able to, fulfill that particular mandate. And I said, okay, fine. But we left off at Genesis chapter 3, and see, the thing here of time, God doesn't give us exact time. So it appears that our parents, our first parents, our human parents, did not spend a lot of time alone before they screwed up. What a tragedy. I mean, this is an absolute human tragedy. Shakespeare wrote a lot of tragedies and this sort of thing, but I think this is the greatest tragedy right here, the fall of mankind through our first parents, known as Adam and Eve. And even though other scriptures, Babylonian scriptures and what have you, talk about this, and I understand why they talk about this, because this was a common and popular record of antiquity. The thing is Genesis gives us a clear picture of where we came from, what happened, why it happened, and pretty much how we can reverse a great deal of it. Remember, just like the NTSB, National Transportation and Safety Board, whenever there's a crash of a major craft, such as a boat, train, plane, whatever, they go out and reconstruct the scene. Why? So they can understand what the hell happened, so they can put in measures to rectify, to prevent it from happening again. And so I think on the scale of human beings, Genesis represents a supreme, no pun intended, it represents a supreme opportunity for us to see what happened, see where we screwed up, how our first parents screwed up. We didn't have anything to do with it, but we are the beneficiaries. Just as, if your parents died and they left you a last will and testament and left you $1 million, for example, or let's say $50,000. I think most people would appreciate $50,000 being willed to them. Genesis leaves us a lot more. It explains our origin, what happened, and how we can make amends with each other and God, which are very, very important, by the way. These are true treasures when properly understood. So we left off at Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, and I think this is one of the saddest chapters in the Bible, because we see where our first parents living in paradise. Eden means delight or paradise. Our first parents were in paradise, and they lost it. And they lost it for a very stupid reason. And I think, again, as I said, I would like to see us recapture some of what was lost by properly understanding what was lost and how it was lost. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And also I wanted to ask you, if you were Adam in the Garden of Eden, would you have eaten from the forbidden fruit? Knowing you as well as you know you, just as a person right now, if you could take a quantum leap back, being the same person that you are now, would you?
Well, that's an excellent question, Debbie, and that's why I guess serendipitously we are pitted here. I'm going to say no. And maybe some people, whoa, wait a minute, how can you say no? Well, I'm going to say no. Because I think it was John Milton that said, and he wrote Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, which is an epic work, by the way. Man was created sufficient to stand, but free to fall. That's very important. Sufficient to stand, but free to fall. So when God told Adam, and Eve, by the way, he told both of them. Both of them had the truth, and we'll see Eve stating the truth. So in answer to your question, no, I would not have done it. Adam didn't have to do it either. That's the point. That's the whole point of culpability. And that's a term that's used in law oftentimes, and it just means accountability, responsibility. You're culpable, blameworthy for what you have done. So when God told Adam, don't do this, he only gave him one command, just one, uno. And so my response to your question, I guess I'm answering it threefold,